All right, y'all, buckle up. Big show today. So in just a second, I think it's official now. Trump has violated a Supreme Court order. Now, he hasn't been held in contempt of court just yet, but there's really no ambiguity here. This is pretty black and white. They aren't even trying, bro. They are not even trying. So we'll talk about that in just a second. We also have the flip-flop continues, dog. It is like one day the tariffs are on, one day the tariffs are off, one day it's this is great for workers, the next day it's art of the deal. But China is now humiliating Trump on the issue of tariffs. We'll talk about that. We also have Trump turning on MAGA red states in a shocking betrayal. You have the continued dismantling of the government by Elon and Doge. We have Bill Maher gushing over Trump and going full MAGA. I'm going to play that whole clip for you and react to it. It is, ugh. If I took you back in time to 2016 Bill Maher when he was supporting Bernie Sanders, and I told you that this is what he was going to do, I don't think any of us would have believed it, but now here we are. Then we'll also get to top Trump officials who have brutally turned on Elon Musk, and they are roasting him. That is a glorious story. Tim Walz smacks down some hecklers. That's fun. Joe Rogan's friends, like his podcast bro, comedian friends, are just, they're done with Elon. They hate this guy seemingly as much as I do, which is a glorious thing to see. And then finally, we'll have a venture capitalist MAGA podcast bro accidentally tells the truth and doesn't realize that he's giving the game away. So a lot to say about that clip as well. Everybody do me a big favor. Please subscribe to the channel. That helps out big time and costs you nothing at all. Deeply, deeply appreciate it. And of course, extra love to all you who support this show on Patreon. Literally couldn't do without you. If you'd like to support the show, the Patreon link is below, or you could tip with that thanks button on YouTube. Or you could sign up for Crystal Kyle and Friends on Substack and get the full Crystal Kyle Friends interviews in video form. Remember, this is real independent media. I've never had a conversation with an advertiser, not once. And I'm never going to do it. I'm never going to do an ad read. This is real grassroots media. You guys funded from the ground up. We're super proud of that fact. And again, thank you very much for making it work. All right, let's go ahead and jump into it here. So let's start with this, guys. I got to give you a bunch of updates on Trump's fascist immigration policies. So the other day, we learned that a U.S. immigration judge in Louisiana ruled that Mahmoud Khalil, the Palestinian Columbia student, can be deported. He can be deported. So, understand, the government is not even accusing him of committing a crime. And he's what's called a permanent legal resident. He has a green card, so he's not an undocumented immigrant. And so this is squarely a First Amendment case. And based on the history of case law in the United States, it is not really up in the air. He did nothing wrong, and he should be protected from deportation. But no, this psycho judge in Louisiana said, hey, who am I to question Marco Rubio? They're allowed to deport him if they want to deport him, right? So let's start with this comment here from 50 Shades. He says, welcome to America where protesting genocide gets you deported, funding apartheid gets you reelected, and bombing babies gets you a standing ovation from Congress. I mean, when you put it like that, it's really, really eye-opening, isn't it? Now, thankfully, this case is not done with yet. It's not done with. There's going to be appeals. There's one case already in Louisiana. That's this one that we're talking about here in front of an immigration judge. But there's another case in New Jersey, and it's his habeas petition. So this is all not over yet. And if I'm being honest with you, I think it's much more likely that when all is said and done, he will be defended by the courts based on what we've seen so far by the courts. Now, clearly, the Trump team's strategy is to try to get all of these people that they want to illegally kick out of the country in front of favorable judges in Louisiana and Texas, knowing that these people are just a rubber stamp for whatever the administration wants to do because they're far-right freaks. That's their strategy here. But, as we've seen with the Supreme Court, they're not fully willing to go along with Trump's destruction of the rule of law in this country. So here, let me give you some more. This is a great point regarding Mahmoud Khalil. The same government claiming that Mahmoud's lawful presence in this country would severely undermine U.S. policy to combat anti-Semitism pardoned a guy wearing a Camp Auschwitz shirt. Stop and think about that. Not only that, they're trying to give the January 6th protesters, the 1,600 of them, many of them violent, many of them assaulted cops, etc., they want to give them money now. They want to pay them reparations. I'm not kidding. So to fight anti-Semitism, we have to kick out a pro-Palestine student who's anti-genocide, but we glorify a dude wearing a Camp Auschwitz shirt and you pardon him? God, it's like we live in an episode of Black Mirror, some shitty futuristic sci-fi novel or something. It's that ridiculous at this point. All right, so now let me give you some more. Looks like Trump and his DOJ are saying they intend to violate the Supreme Court and district court orders and not facilitate the return of Abrego Garcia by claiming he is now in the sole custody of El Salvador. So here, let me read Trump's full statement here. Looking forward to seeing President Bukele of El Salvador on Monday. Our nations are working closely together to eradicate terrorist organizations and build a future of prosperity. President Bukele has graciously accepted into his nation's custody some of the most violent alien enemies of the world, and in particular, the United States. These barbarians are now in the sole custody of El Salvador, a proud and sovereign nation, and their future is up to President B and his government. They will never threaten nor menace our citizens again. So this is Trump saying, what do you want me to do, dog? We sent these people to El Salvador. They're no longer under our jurisdiction. It's up to President Bukele. And he's certainly making it look like he didn't even fucking try, which he was literally ordered by the Supreme Court of the United States to facilitate the return of him. Okay, ready? Then we get this. Judge Zinnis, I believe that's how you pronounce that, finds that the Trump administration violated a direct court order. Now, this isn't them being held in contempt just yet, but they're this close to being held in contempt of court. Here we go. For the reasons discussed during today's status conference, the court finds that the defendants have failed to comply with this court's order at ECF number 51. So, in other words, they're supposed to try to facilitate the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. They're also supposed to give updates on a daily basis as to what exactly they're doing to try to facilitate the return. And to this point, they haven't done shit. They basically released a statement being like, look, they're in the custody of El Salvador, and we can validate that they're fine. That's it. What's so crazy is that the Supreme Court gave Trump a little bit of wiggle room by saying, look, you don't have to return and you don't have to facilitate and effectuate the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. You just have to facilitate it. In other words, they changed the language to say, hey, we can't impede on the executive branch foreign policy decisions, but we can say this person was illegally sent. You guys have conceded this person was illegally sent, so you at least have to try. And the Trump administration's reaction to it is not even to put on a show pretending like they're trying, which then puts the Supreme Court in the position where they'll be forced to say, you didn't even fucking try to facilitate the return. Never mind facilitate and effectuate. So you are in violation of our order, and we're gonna have to hold you in contempt. Right? Again, to reiterate, we are not just there yet. We're not quite there yet for contempt of court, but they are super fucking close. Now, you ready for this? This should really, really be an eye-opener for you. Ready? Days before masked immigration and customs enforcement agents detained Tufts University student Rumeysa Ozturk to deport her, the State Department determined that the Trump administration had not produced any evidence showing that she engaged in anti-Semitic activities or made public statements supporting a terrorist organization, as the government has alleged. The finding, contained in a March memo that was described to the Washington Post, said Secretary of State Marco Rubio did not have sufficient grounds for revoking Ozturk's visa under an authority empowering the top U.S. diplomat to safeguard the foreign policy interests of the United States. The memo, written by an office within the State Department, raises doubts about the public accusations made by the Trump administration as it has sought to justify Ozturk's deportation. The Department of Homeland Security has said Ozturk engaged in activities in support of Hamas, a U.S. designated terrorist organization, but neither that agency nor U.S. prosecutors have provided any evidence for that claim. So in other words, what happened here is she wrote a milquetoast op-ed right? A milquetoast op-ed saying, hey, Israel, please stop bombing innocent people. We need Palestinians to be free and have human rights. And they use that to kidnap her. They use that to disappear her. And they can't even find evidence of bombastic statements that are anti-Semitic or in support of Hamas. Now, by the way, let's be clear, legally speaking, she would have every right to support Hamas. She would have every right, if she was anti-Semitic, to say those words. That's the reality of the law. This is what free speech is, right? But what they're saying is, we don't even have that. We haven't even reached the bar, which still wouldn't be acceptable to deport her, but is a higher bar. We haven't even reached that bar. So what they're doing here is flagrantly violating the law, flagrantly violating the Constitution, and their own State Department is going, this ain't right, dog. This is not dissimilar from Kilmar Abrego Garcia. This is not dissimilar from him, where they admitted in court, like, yeah, it was kind of a mistake. It was an error. We got him at the last minute. There's no evidence of any gang relations. They admitted all of that in court. And then what did Trump do? Fired the guy who admitted the truth in court. And now they're not even trying to bring back Kilmar Abrego Garcia. So do you see what's going on here, y'all? Like, this is just fascism. Let's call it what it is. This is just fascism. All right, more. Ready? The administration continues to deport people to the El Salvador gulag without due process of law. So Marco Rubio came out and said, last night, another 10 criminals from the MS-13 and Tren de Aragua foreign terrorist organizations arrived in El Salvador. The alliance between the president and Nayib Bukele has become an example for security and prosperity in our hemisphere. So even after you have the Supreme Court coming out and saying, hey man, you guys violated the law, you got to facilitate the return of Kilmar Abrego Garcia. Even after that, and even after saying you have to offer everybody due process, that's the law. There's no way around it. Marco Rubio comes out and he's bragging about deporting 10 more people without due process of law. And by the way, let's be clear, the number of innocent people being sent to El Salvador, the low number is 75% of the 238 people that were sent there are totally innocent of any crime, never committed any crime. The high number I've seen is 90% of the people sent haven't committed any crimes whatsoever, right? And of the ones that did commit crimes, most of them were nonviolent crimes. So we're talking, they're getting everything wrong, right? But they continue anyway. They move ahead anyway. They continue to give them no due process. They just claim, oh, they're MS-13 or they're Tren de Aragua, and then they shove their head in the sand and say, shut the fuck up, I don't want to hear any responses, even though that notion has been debunked with virtually everybody who's been sent so far. Now, by the way, we got to go one step further here, too. Even if they were gang members, that doesn't mean you can send them to a foreign slave labor gulag. And now, of course, they're talking about sending American citizens there, too. They're openly saying this. These are not difficult cases. This is not like hard to figure out what's acceptable and what's not acceptable. All of these things are illegal and unconstitutional. It reminds me of all the shit Elon's doing with Doge. Not a single thing Doge has done has been legal or constitutional based on the plain face reading of the law. And every court is verifying that back to back to back to back. Even with Mahmoud Khalil on appeal, watch, you're going to see a very, very different story emerge. So, again, the fascism meter is absolutely broken now. They are off the fucking charts on the fascism meter. All right, more. Trump apparently decided to watch 60 Minutes the other night, and it was critical of him. And guess what he did? He immediately comes out and says this. Almost every week, 60 Minutes, which is being sued for billions of dollars for the fraud they committed in the 2024 presidential election with their interview of failed presidential candidate Kamala Harris, mentions the name Trump in a derogatory and defamatory way. But this weekend's broadcast tops them all. They did not one, but two major stories on Trump, one having to do with Ukraine, which I say is a war that would never have happened if the 2020 election had not been rigged. In other words, if I were president. And the other story was having to do with Greenland, casting our country as led by me, falsely, inaccurately, and fraudulently. I am so honored to be suing 60 Minutes, CBS Fake News, and Paramount over their fraudulent beyond recognition reporting. They did everything possible to illegally elect Kamala, including completely and corruptly changing major answers to interview questions. But it just didn't work for them. They are not a news show, but a dishonest political operative simply disguised as news and must be responsible for what they have done and are doing. They should lose their license. Hopefully, the Federal Communications Commission, as headed by its highly respected chairman, Brendan Carr, will impose the maximum fines and punishment, which is substantial, for their unlawful and illegal behavior. CBS is out of control at levels never seen before, and they should pay a big price for this. Make America great again. Yet again, we have example number, 436, of Trump being like, de-license the outlets that say mean things about me. You should go after them in court. You should fine them. You should try to make them stop existing because they dared to criticize me. I never want to hear another fucking word from the right about free speech or the Constitution or law and order, for that matter. There has never been a president in modern American history more hostile to those three things. He's waging an all-out war on free speech in front of our eyes as he cloaks himself in free speech and pretends like he's saving free speech and he's protecting free speech. Because guess what? Comedians can say pussy and retard again. Free speech, but not free speech to criticize the king. Never mind all of the absolute, just the dismantling of our laws and our Constitution right in front of our faces. This war he's waging on innocent people who criticized a foreign government that's committing a genocide streamed in 4K. Like, what the fuck are we talking about, man? What are we talking about? And so, look, here's the thing, man. I do not know what's going to happen. I don't, right? Because here you have this the administration, or the regime, I should say, flagrantly violating court orders, right? Not one time, but multiple times. Not even bothering to put on the show that any other administration would do, where they at least try to act like, hey, we're listening to your ruling, and we're trying to do the things that you say we need to do. And oh, tee-hee-hee, oh my goodness, we weren't able to get Kilmar Abrego Garcia back, but here's our evidence that we tried, right? And the Supreme Court, knowing them, the majority conservative court would probably go, they tried, right? They tried. Like, so we did everything we can. We can't control foreign policy. That's what they would do in that scenario. But they're so over the top with it, and they're not even trying to put on the show to pretend like they respect the Supreme Court and they respect the rule of law, that now it really is the case that the courts their hands are being forced. And I think what the Supreme Court is going to learn is what we've been talking about, that Roberts thought if I give Trump some wins and then eventually hit him with an L, he'll respect the L because he'll think, oh, we're fair. We gave him some wins, right? That is not the reality. You give the fascists an inch and they will take a mile. That's all. Look at what's happening with Colombia, and we'll talk about this either later today or tomorrow. But Trump put all these conditions on them, getting federal money. They agreed to it. And then soon after that, Trump goes, actually, we want to put the whole university under like some federal conservatorship where we get to run the entire university. So they caved up front, and then Trump said, oh, I'm going to go even further. This is what happens with the fascists. So anytime you give them a W, what you're actually doing is emboldening them. You're emboldening them. You're not coming across as reasonable. Therefore, when they actually disagree with you, then you'll listen. That's not how it works. And I think the Supreme Court is going to learn that the hard way. So hold your breath. I don't know what comes next. At some point, they're going to have to be ruled in contempt of court. At some point, the Supreme Court is going to hear like literally all of these immigration cases and deprivation of free speech cases. And based on case law, it's not really close. I think they're going to have to rule against the administration. And then what happens? Right? Because if they're not even putting on the dog and pony show of, oh, we respect the court, we listen to the court, separation of powers, checks and balances, then it's just a rapskis, right? People are saying, we are nearly in a constitutional crisis. Nearly? Bitch, it's been going on. We are going down this slippery slope. We're at the bottom of that bitch. We've been slipping and sliding for a long time now. We're at the bottom of the shit. Like, It's here. It's here. It's here. And these are full fascists. These are full authoritarians. They have zero respect for the law. All they want to do is exercise power in whatever way they deem appropriate, right? They're incredibly corrupt. They're incredibly incompetent. They're incredibly stupid. And there's nothing that's reeling them in anymore. Nothing. And the courts are largely going to be on the correct side of this, but then if they don't react the correct way, what you're learning here is the system we've had for all these years really relies on people of good faith, right? Like agreeing to the checks and balances. And does this administration look like it's good faith to you? I think we all know the answer to that. Hey, y'all, do me a favor and like and subscribe. It helps out big time in the algorithm. Click the bell as well for notifications when videos drop, and watch that video on screen right now. You know you want to.